And that model is immediately transferable to every state and every sport in the Commonwealth and overseas. We could ship this through Foreign Affairs to Fiji, where it would have far more impact than any number of buildings, patrol boats, whatever else, because it is at community level. I think we'd start by referring back to the original generic brief as to where we started from.
Yep.
I was diagnosed with leukemia in July 2014. I then had to find a matched donor, and despite having 7 siblings, only one sister who was outside the parameters provided was a good match. They did this. I was chemoed and radiated in December and received the stem cell in December of 14. Now, whilst I was recovering over the next 6 to 12 months, a mate of ours, a guy named Peter Selby from the Powerhouse Rugby Club, part Maori, state player, etc., he contracted leukemia. And despite having 6 siblings and 4 sons, no match.
You're kidding. Wow.
I lived and he died. That's where we started this, through the Powerhouse Rugby Club, through Ron and John and Dean, and we then set our minds to increasing the number of Maori, Indigenous and Pasifika on the registry. And it was only then that we found out that their numbers are less than 1% on the registry for an event that we've got coming up on the 18th of March, which is the Tackle Leukaemia 10s competition down here in Victoria.
Oh,
we
nice.
hope to have 24 men's teams and 6 women's teams competing in a 10 knockout 10s competition. It'll go all day, and our modus operandi is that we are not making it mandatory, but encouraging as much as we can the teams that want to participate will agree to provide 5 or more volunteers as potential donors. That, in round figures, is 150 additional donors. And the bone marrow donor registry people are coming down, including their CEO, to assist us in that. But again, we are thwarted by the government's lack of releasing the funding to the bone marrow donor registry. They've obligated it under a program they used to have called Strength to Give, but the money hasn't been forthcoming. Each swab costs about $100 because it's and although the bone marrow donor registry is moving to a digital platform and therefore they don't have the written collateral, that will reduce the price, but we're still looking at about $75, we think, Australian per swab. And the swabs are processed in New York, which is another issue. But if we want to swab 1,000 potential donors in a year, that's $100,000.
Okay.
I mean, in government terms, that's chicken feed. But the reality is, when you get leukemia, the first thing you want to find is a well-matched donor. And if you don't, your chances of survival drastically reduced to minimal to none. And all this delay is doing, being brutal, is causing people to die.
Was there like a strong enough initiative before you guys come along with this sort of diaspora that we're talking about in terms of getting the donors?
No. So what happened was Peter Selby, who's a long-term friend of ours, talking 30 plus years, when he was coming down to Melbourne for treatment, we would go and see him, and as things evolved, and it became clearer that it was going to be harder and harder for him to get a match, and they were trying other techniques or other treatments to try help him. He said, "Look, he said, I've spoken to the medicos, and this boils down to one thing." He said, mate, it's my Maori blood." He said, there's not enough people on the registry with similar characteristics in their blood. Now, Susan, as a medical professional, will be able to explain that to you far better than I can. But the first-hand knowledge that we got from him at the time was there aren't enough people and I'll be generic here and say the Māori Pasifika diaspora, because that's what we were looking at that time. We hadn't included Australian Indigenous or ASI people at that point because we didn't know about it. And so he said, he said, mate, what they're looking for is fit young blokes, 18 to 35. He said, that's what rugby players are. And half the rugby players in Victoria, more than half the rugby players in Victoria, come from the Pasifika background. And in other states, there's a large percentage of ATSI people in there as well. So, he said, we've got to go out to the group and get the boys. And that's where that was a very simple idea that it had. And because we've all been involved in rugby at, coaching level and club presidencies and all those sort of things, we were able to, and we know all of the other people in the other clubs in the same sort of position. It was relatively easy for us to start the approaches.
One of the other aspects is there's 260,000, whatever it is, people on the Australian register, mostly Caucasian, and I can send you some charts and all the rest. Oh, they're in the annual report, actually. Yep. But the for Caucasians, if there isn't a good match on the Australian register, they flick to the international register. And on the international register, most of the donors are German or European origin. And the Australian bone marrow donor registry use some of those as well. And the reason for that is that in Germany, they have an opt-out clause on their license. Not many people do, so they automatically become organ donors and stem cell donors at the same time. So therefore, the pool, if you like, of potential donors for Caucasians is quite wide.
Yep.
But for people of different blood types, as Ron has just said, and as Susan's about to chime in with, it doesn't look good. And as I said, 1%, less than 1% of donors are of Maori, Pasifika or Indigenous background.
Yeah.
Yet they are overrepresented with the disease, but grossly underrepresented on the registry. If people are of mixed race, and I'm not trying to be bloody a smart ass or anything, but as soon as the offspring, they have predominantly the Maori, Indigenous or Pasifika blood, and therefore they are more than at risk and don't have the right blood type or donors. So the more of that occurs, the less likely they are because of the limited number on the registry.
Ethnicity plays a bigger part often for getting matches, as does family matches there.
Okay.
Which was a little like in Kevin's case there. We often find that family matches is where we try first, but when that doesn't work, the ethnicity is the next part that we have to look at there at this point in time. Yeah. And the rather good thing is if we can sort of get a lot more on the register in Pasifika, because there's a lot of what we call blended ethnicity and blended DNA with them, the likelihood of getting better matches is significantly increased, but we don't have the numbers there. I've worked with some other areas in regards to some kidney situations and a clinical trial, and in Pasifika, it's quite it's not unusual for us to be able to find some HLA matches for some other things in a bigger group, because also we have quite large family groups, and also because of a lot of mixed heritage, which is wonderful, we have a lot more to choose from, except we don't have very many on the register.
That's right.
So the more numbers we get on the register, the better it is.
Yeah.
Also, you have to realise that in many cases, it may not also be just ethnicity. So we do know that we may still get a HLA or a donor match or a stem cell match from perhaps somebody Pasifika for somebody who is not Pasifika, but does actually, there is a good match for that. So they're not just helping their own community, they could be helping others there at this point in time. And I have seen that a couple of times, especially because childhood leukemia is quite an issue. And of course, we want to be able to help as many there. We want to help everybody. But, you know, childhood leukemia is one. And if the child has any of this sort of Pasifika ethnicity, we definitely have to have those ones. Especially if we're also looking to match with our First Nations persons and our First Nations peoples, ethnicity is going to be a big thing there to get a match. And there again, they're very underrepresented.
Certainly. Do people with an African heritage follow a similar trend?
We do seek some others there. Again, from a genetic and ethnicity, they probably won't have a success match. But current working with two groups in regards to some health checks, and one is a Kenyan community and one is Sudanese community. We
can you read
don't
that?
seem to be able to get a lot of that.
Sure.
Right down the bottom here is African. 2 up here is Pasifika.
I see.
Top is Caucasian. But that's how tragic it is. Now, Susan mentioned that because of ethnicity and all the rest of it, mate, we will take anybody, but our focus is the cohort that we're speaking about.
Yeah.
When we first started this, there was some suggestions. The best way is a major publicity campaign or mail outs or all the rest of it. Well, I'm terribly sorry, that does not work. We have a high level of credibility with our community, and our model of going face to face and talking to these guys works. Nothing else does. And that model is immediately transferable to every state and every sport in the Commonwealth and overseas. We could ship this through Foreign Affairs to Fiji, where it would have far more impact than any number of buildings, patrol boats, whatever else, because it is at community level.
Yep.
And that's why it's worked.
That's awesome. So I imagine there really hasn't been any other initiatives like tackling leukemia that has sort of got your results, because you were saying that there was somewhat of a 10% increase that you guys have managed to work out over a course of 18 months or so, or something like that.
Yeah, less than 12 months. Yes.
Amazing.
Yeah, we've been established for longer, but where our activities were curtailed by COVID.
Yeah.
There's another organisation called You Are the Cure, but and they also try and work with smaller ethnic groups. But again, it's mail out. It's not face-to-face contact, and they haven't had the same deal of success. There's a crowd in England called Bloody Rugby that also have a lot of Fijians playing rugby over there, and they use the mail out too, but it has not been that successful. But one of the areas that we have had success is the Red Cross had contacted us last year. They had 3 patients of that particular ethnicity, HLA and blood type, that needed blood transfusions to live. No blood in the blood bank. They came to us to see if we could assist. We went out through Rugby Victoria to all the clubs in Victoria, and one of their directors is a chap named Alan Latu, who did a publicity blurb as well, and we got blood donors and saved these lives. I mean, for us, that was an incredible shot in the arm But we know that by providing more guys and girls on the bone marrow donor registry, we'll stand a better chance of saving all of those ones that sort of slipped through the cracks, as you had correctly mentioned in your first article, because they're not First Nations people, when they're diagnosed or close to death or whatever, it is only the immediate cause that goes on the death certificate. It's not all the underlying things, as you have correctly pointed out. We've said that, and unfortunately, ethnicity is not recorded in any of the hospitals, public or private, in relation to relating ethnicity to a particular disease.
Is it not?
No.
Wow. I didn't realise. I thought that would have been a given.
So did we. They do it in New Zealand, and there's some good studies from New Zealand that cover it. Sorry, Susan?
We do collect some data and analytics on ethnicity in relation to it, but it is not significantly, or it's not recorded in a, you know, they don't approach it with a quantitative, qualitative, any of those sorts of processes. The methodology is quite skewed for collection. That's the problem.
Yeah, that is a big problem. Especially, I mean, when we're, as you guys already know, as we're talking about preventative health, when we're talking about these demographics, is more important than the end. It is so much more.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so if we are actually able to address things, and also, of course, with anything, any of the blood cancers, anything, the earlier, the better. And also, if we can identify that donor match as early as possible, it improves the outcome. So we move away from that 5-year outcome to, you know, extending it out much further there at this point in time.
I think the key message for us, Joe, is that we're at the grassroots front end of it all. So we're actually getting people joining up on the registry. One of the things that's held people back in the past, particularly from the groups that we're talking about, is, and Kevin loves to refer to this, there's a bit of needle reluctance amongst these great big bruising rugby thugs. I speak as one myself, but not as big as them. There's a bit of needle reluctance, and therefore, in the past, when they had to go into the Red Cross blood bank and go through the procedure of signing up as a full blood donor, I don't know if you've ever done that, but it's not a short procedure. Then they would take a blood sample, one of which would go off for HLA matching, and all of that is very off-putting. It's time-consuming. Trying to get them to do it in a group, and I know we've done that with our rugby club. We've taken them down to the blood bank, and it's like herding cats. You just can't get them to do it. You can't. There's always a reason why someone can't do it. People, I'll come back next week. All those sort of things. The way we go out, and we're all. John's a Queenslander. I've played rugby in Brisbane. We're quite familiar with the local scene up there. And we would go out, or representatives of us would go out to the clubs. Our models, we go out on a Tuesday training night, tell them what's going to happen, brief them up for it, go back on the Thursday night, make it happen with the swabs, bundle it up and send them all off together. So it's a, if you like, two-stop exercise, but we're in control of it. We can answer all their questions at the same time. Because we've all been footy coaches and that sort of thing, we know how to control the group. There's no back chat, chit chat. We're very nice about it, but we get the job done, and they respect that. And we work with their coaches, and we know when to stop and when to start and all that sort of stuff. And it works. And that's the model that we want to continue working with, and it'll work in other sports. We're looking at other sports as well, and it will be applicable to each sport the way each sport is run. So it'll be tailor-made for each group, you know.
Yep. Yeah. I think it could be easily as well. That's awesome. Having said all this, what can I actually help with right now that will, you know, a call to action that can actually try and get this, bring more awareness, get it rolling? You know, what's the next step?
You can speak with Linda Burney, the Minister for Indigenous Australians, or Pat Conroy, Minister for International Development in the Pacific, to get the funds released.
Okay.
It's not a question of making the allocation. It's been made. They're just held up.
Okay.
I don't know why. It's not really any of our business, and we're not interested. What we want to do is get the money so we can go out and collect swabs and have them processed. Full stop, the end.
Yep.
The swabbing program has proved to be extraordinarily, it works better than anything else. And so the original project, the original Strength to Give, looked to do 6,000. That was done. It worked well. The funding was there. There is funding to do more. And it was an outstanding success to be able to get people onto that. Our model, though, works better to ensure that we get them, there's a larger success rate in this active model as opposed to the others. So we just need the swabbing program, and especially as we work under a swabbing event model, we just need the funding for the swabbing to be released. It is there with the Australian Bone Marrow Donor Registry. We're just needing it to be re-released so we can undertake the swabbing again without us having to look to be funding it. At the moment, that's what we are currently doing, is having to fund the processing.
As an aside, the Leukaemia Foundation, who source funds for research and also for assistance to people and families that have leukemia, their back end, as we've described, we are very much front end. But the Leukaemia Foundation, through their CEO and all that, are very, very supportive of what we do.
Okay, yeah, I was going to ask that. Yeah.
Yeah.
I was going to say, how much are they able to be involved in this process? How much can they assist, sort of thing, or not necessarily?
Well, apart from a lot of moral support, not much, because as I said, their focus is back end. Ours is very, very much front end. Yep. We've met with Chris Tanti. We're meeting with him again shortly. Extremely supportive. Very happy with what we are doing and where we are at, and they want more of it, which then come down to the money for the processing of the swabs.
Yeah.
Right at this moment, we've got about 6 or 8 clubs that want to join us immediately. All right, that's another 160.
Yeah.
We've got a main event coming up on the 18th of March, which is the Tackling Leukaemia 10s, where we'll have 24 men's teams and 6 women's teams, as we said, potentially on that one day, 150 minimum donors or potential donors. That may double to 300.
Wow.
But that in cold hard cash is about $30,000.
Okay.
Yeah, and to that event, the Bone Marrow Donor Registry people are coming down to help us with the event because it's now an online sign up. So they've got all the gear to do online sign-ups, but we've still got to go through the process of getting an effective swab. And we do that by monitoring them and teaching them how to do it, because a simple thing like putting the swab down on a table or something like that when you've taken the swab is enough to negate the validity of the sample. So we watch them through that. And if they mess it up, well, we make them do it again. Yeah. So it's
the only limitation is that, and this is from the clinical side, is they're not allowed to have had anything to eat or drink or smoke, including vaping, for an hour prior.
Yeah.
So what we're doing at the Tackling Leukaemia 10s is that we'll have people come in and we'll give them a paper armband with a sticker on it. We'll ask them the questions, and if they have had any to eat and are temporarily excluded, we'll write on their wristband the time they're to come back to be swabbed. Okay. And when they do come back, we'll give them one of these.
Oh, deadly. Nice.
I'll send you one.
Okay. Yeah, I love that. Would there be any benefit apart from time's sake by having a lab established here?
Absolutely.
Processing, yeah.
However, the real and Susan's working on that, but at the moment, because of COVID and the outcomes from COVID, most of the labs are still fairly busy doing that, and that's the priority. Would that we could do it here, it would be significantly cheaper. However, the lab can't be solely doing swabs for bone marrow donor registry. It needs to be doing other things. Okay. So we've either got to get an existing lab or come up with mega bucks to fund our own lab.